Hello, my name is Mark Ellis from Stick and Rotor Studios, and today I want to take you through a tutorial on using X-KeyPad 1.5.1 with the Stream Deck devices. So what we're going to cover today is an overview of the Stream Deck devices. We'll talk a little bit about the concepts in X-KeyPad and how it interacts with these devices. We'll show you how to actually install the Stream Deck X-KeyPad plugin into the Stream Deck software. We'll look at how to load a sample configuration that I've already done and how to basically map that to the Stream Deck keys. We'll walk through defining a new key, and we'll take a look at some encoder definitions and encoder layouts. And then lastly, we'll wrap up with expressive commands and an example of how you could use expressive commands. So there's a couple assumptions in this tutorial. The assumption is that you've got some familiarity with Stream Deck devices. Obviously you can watch this, but knowing a little bit about how the Stream Deck devices work and how you generally use them as a separate device will come in handy, because I'm not going to cover all the little intricacies of how to create pages and folders and profiles and things of that nature within the Stream Deck. The other assumption is that you've watched some of the previous X-KeyPad tutorial videos. There's a lot of things in those previous tutorial videos to talk about the difference between commands and data refs, what the number buffer is all about within X-KeyPad, and things like numeric data refs and that type of capability. All of those things that we talked about in the previous tutorials that can be used with the virtual devices and the X-Touch Mini, they all apply to doing configurations with the Stream Deck. So I'm not going to get into a great amount of detail on how that all works within this tutorial, because the assumption is you can get all that by watching those other tutorial videos. And it may be a good idea to watch those first before getting too deep into the Stream Deck. And the other thing is there's going to be some assumption that you've got some familiarity with expressions and formulas, particularly when we get to using the expressive commands. That's going to follow a lot along the lines of the way formulas work, and there's a whole tutorial on what those are. Okay, so the Elgato Stream Deck devices, in case you don't own one, and you're looking at this tutorial video to see whether you think you might want to buy one, these are kind of the devices that you can get. They have a smaller one, which you see on the left-hand side, and last I looked, that was retailing for like $149. There's the Stream Deck Plus, which is their newest device, and frankly, the one I really like the Stream Deck Plus a lot. It's retailing for $200, and what's interesting with the Stream Deck Plus is not only does it have some programmable keys on it, it's also got these 4 encoders that come in very handy for emulating many of the cockpit functions like heading hold and heading knobs, coarse knobs, tuning the radios. All that stuff can be done with these encoders. And what's really nice about the Stream Deck Plus is over the top of each encoder is a little 100 pixel by 200 pixel LCD panel that X-KeyPad will actually allow you to put graphics and text in there. So it can be very context aware as to, what you're using that encoder for. Then they got the Stream Deck XL, which sells for $240, and that's basically just a larger version of the one on the left. It's just got more 32 keys on it. Personally, I think the sweet spot is having a Stream Deck Plus and a Stream Deck XL. Really a great combination. Obviously, kind of expensive. You're looking at $440, for the pair of them, but they really do make a fantastic combination. And do keep in mind with all these Stream Deck devices, they've got an incredible capability of defining multiple profiles and folders and pages with those profiles. So even though you have a limited number of encoders and keys, by allowing you to very quickly switch between pages and folders on the Stream Deck, you can get a lot of functionality. You just don't necessarily get a whole lot all on one screen at one time, which you can a little bit with the Stream Deck XL, but that's some of the disadvantages. And Stream Deck also supports this working on an iOS device or a I think it even works on a Android tablet, an Android phone, if you want to use it with a mobile device. Okay, some of the concepts. So there's a few pieces of the software. So the first thing is the X-KeyPad Stream Deck configuration. This is the piece of software and the configuration that sits over on the X-Plane side of the equation. It's your X-KeyPad plugin. And along with that is going to be a configuration that you do that's going to define what happens when an action takes place, whether that be a key press on a Stream Deck device, whether you rotate a dial, or whether you touch one of the panels over the top of the encoders, which are touch sensitive. That configuration also can determine what should be displayed on the key or the encoder LCD panel. And that can be very dynamic. It can be based upon, data refs or data within the X-Plane simulator as to what you want to show or not show. A typical example might be that you want the key to look differently when a taxi light is on versus when a taxi light is off. And this Stream Deck configuration on the X-Plane side, that's what it does. It has all the logic in it that you would define, determining what should be displayed on the Stream Deck device. The next piece of software you've got is the Stream Deck software itself. And it runs on your Windows or your Mac machine. And it's the thing that actually does the interface between the actual Stream Deck hardware devices and other plugins that can work within the Stream Deck software. And it does things like allowing you to define profiles, pages of keys and encoders, and folders of keys and encoders that can then also contain pages themselves. So it helps you organize the data. And then the third part is the X-KeyPad Stream Deck plugin. This is another small piece of software that you actually install within the Stream Deck software. And it's the thing that does the communication between, the Stream Deck software as it's talking to the hardware. The Stream Deck software then talks to the X-KeyPad plugin, and then the X-KeyPad plugin then talks to the X-KeyPad piece of software that's running over on the X-Plane side. So there's sort of three pieces of software that are running here. And that Stream Deck plugin, it acts as the bridge between the X-KeyPad plugin running in X-Plane and the Stream Deck software. And it uses this thing, which you're going to see in a minute here, it uses a function name to map an action that you place on a Stream Deck key with the configuration definition over on the X-Plane side. And we'll actually see how this works in just a minute. Okay, so Stream Deck key configurations. They're very similar to the configurations you could do with virtual devices and the X-Touch Mini or the PI Engineering keyboards with X-KeyPad. The one big difference is that with those other configurations, they're very hardwired, okay, to the layout of the device. In other words, in the definition, you would actually define where on the virtual device that key is going to show up. Physically, is it going to be in column 0, row 1, or row 5, column 5? Where it's positioned, you actually define the positioning within the configuration over on the X-Plane side. That's not the case with the Stream Decks. The configuration on the X-Plane side simply does the definition of what's going to happen when you press a key and what is things going to look like depending upon how you want that key or that encoder panel to look when something changes with the simulator. Where you put it on the Stream Deck device is entirely up to the Stream Deck software. So the X-KeyPad X-Plane side of things actually has no idea where you put it. And other than the fact that it knows the difference between an encoder action and a key action, it actually has no idea what physical device you've put this on. That's all done through the communication. So all of your positioning and layout is all going to get done over using that Stream Deck software. Okay. The other difference is on the virtual devices, you have a lot of control over what the key text is going to look like on a line-by-line basis. You could have a line of text that's actually got multiple colors on it. Each line of text can be a different font, and it can even have a different font size, on it. On the Stream Deck side, we don't have that much control over the font. We definitely put multiple lines of text over there, but you only can determine the size of the text and the color of the text over on the Stream Deck size, and you cannot intermix it. You can't have different lines with different text colors. You can do it to some degree with the little panels over the top of the encoders on the Stream Deck Plus, but on the Stream Deck XL and the other size down, or basically any of the keys, you have limited control over intermixing the font and font size and color on a line-by-line basis, on the key. You can change the text a lot, right? So you could have different text showing there based upon what's going on in the simulator. You also have a lot of control over the image that gets played underneath. So what a lot of people will do is if they need to have a lot of control over the text, they'll actually just create images in Photoshop or some other image software, and then the Stream Deck configuration can determine which image am I going to show based upon what's going on within the simulator. On the encoder configurations, let's talk a little bit how these differ from what you could do, say, on the X-Touch Mini. Similar situation. On the X-Touch Mini, the definitions are hardwired to that particular encoder. So in other words, encoder 0 maps to a physical encoder 0 on the X-Touch Mini. Encoder 1 physically maps to that. Here, because of the fact that you have all these pages and folders, the only way that we make a mapping between the physical encoder and the definitions is all done through this function name. So, you could literally have many, many, many encoders on your Stream Deck Plus simply by adding multiple folders and multiple pages. And, the X-KeyPad side of things really doesn't have any idea where you place them. The other advantage of the encoders on the Stream Deck is they've all got this little 100 pixel high by 200 pixel wide panel over the top of the encoder. And that panel is also touch sensitive. So if you touch it, you can actually get the simulator to do things based upon what you pressed on it. The X-Touch Mini does not have that panel. So actually labeling the encoders in the X-Touch Mini can be a little bit of a pain in the neck, where labeling is just really easy with the Stream Deck Plus. Okay? So that gives you a little bit of an idea of what the differences are. Okay, with that, why don't we take a look at how to install, the plugin? Okay, so this is the Stream Deck software that you're gonna be installing the X-KeyPad Stream Deck plugin into this. And you can see here that you basically get kind of a virtual look at what a particular hardware device that you've got connected looks like. I actually have on my system the Stream Deck Plus and the Stream Deck XL. So here we're actually seeing it. And what we want to do is install the X-KeyPad plugin so that it shows up here in the sidebar, which will then allow me to drag and drop and put actions over here on these different keys. Okay? So the way we're going to do that is we're going to come over here to Windows Explorer, and you're going to navigate to where your X-KeyPad plugin's installed. So here it's under X-Plane 11, Resources Plugins, and we're going to double click on the X-KeyPad directory. And in here will be a folder called SD-plugin. And if we double click there, you're going to see that there is a Stream Deck plugin file here that if we simply double click on it, the Stream Deck software will detect that and it will install it. And you can see that this little pop-up come back, and it's the Stream Deck software saying, do you want to install this plugin? And we'll say yes. And lo and behold, if installed properly, X-KeyPad shows up down here, in the sidebar. Now what I can do is I can drag and drop this, and this basically what this is called an action. So it's an X-KeyPad action. And you could drag actions and you could put them on any of the keys. And then I'm going to show you in a minute how you map that up, okay, with the functions. But before we do that, let's get X-Plane up and running, and let's actually load a sample configuration. Okay, so we have X-Plane up and running here, and I have the sound turned down in the simulator so that you can hear my voice and I'm not having to talk over the engines running in the noisy Cessna 172. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to load or create a configuration for the Cessna 172. And what we're going to do here is we're going to come over to the plugins menu, go to X-KeyPad, and if you're familiar with this, we've got all the different configuration editors here, the X-Touch Mini, the virtual device one for the X-KeyPad configuration editor, and here we're going to bring up the Stream Deck configuration editor. Now, at the moment right now, I have no definition in here. And if you come over to the definition list, you'll see that the defined keys are completely empty. I have no keys, no defined keys or encoders. I do have lots of empty slots here that I can use. So what comes with X-KeyPad is there is a sample configuration which has a lot of generic keys and encoders defined. These are keys and encoders that they're not unique to any particular plane, and generally they will work in almost any aircraft that you put them in. I mean, there's obviously going to be some differences, but for the most part, you can use them and they'll work a good percentage of the time, regardless of the aircraft that you load them in. So all the ones I've got in here work perfectly fine with the Cessna 172. So let's go ahead and load that. We're going to come up and we're going to do a file append. And in a minute, I'm going to show you this selected append, but let's just do a file append. And we're going to come under here under X-Plane 11, Resources, Plugins, X-KeyPad, Samples, Stream Deck, and here's the generic JSON file that has all the generic definitions. And I'm going to bring that in. Now, if we come over here and we look at the definition list, you'll see that we have a bunch of keys that are defined, and here are their function names. So keypad 0, keypad 1, keypad 2, these are the keys that are for the number pad. For those of you that are familiar with this or watch the other tutorials, the number pad is a way that we can enter numbers into the numeric buffer and then press a key like a COM key or the transponder key to get that value to be inserted into the simulator, either as a radio frequency or maybe a transponder code or autopilot altitude or vertical speed parameter. Okay. We've also got functions here for like COM1 and COM2, which are the radios. And if you hover over this, a little question mark here, you could see the comments that I put in for what that function does. So here's all the ones that we've got defined, in that generic sample. Okay. Now, before we go on, I want to quickly show you the append operation. What I'm going to do is come down here and I'm going to just take this configuration and I'm going to delete this COM1. Okay. If I come up here and I do a selected append, and just to talk about how these work, append is always going to, what append's going to do is if you have an empty configuration, it's just going to automatically bring everything in that it finds in the file that it's appending. If you have an existing configuration and you're appending onto it, if it finds a match between the function name in the file that you're appending and the function name of a current configuration that you've got installed, it's just going to replace it. It doesn't even ask you, it just automatically replaces it. And anything that does not find a match on the function name, it'll basically add it to the configuration. Selected append is going to give you a little more control over things. So we're going to now selectively append exactly that same file again that I deleted the COM1 key out of. And now it kind of gives you an opportunity, right? Here you can see it's showing you that it found a match, right? So you can see here with this little info, it says the keys are identical. It knows that the keypad 0 definition in my current configuration I have loaded matches the keypad 0 function name in the appending file, and they're exactly the same. It actually does a comparison between the definitions. So I have a choice now. I could say replace that, which is really going to be kind of useless for if they're already identical. But if they weren't identical, this little green info thing wouldn't be here. And I could say I want to take the new one and replace it over the top of it. Okay. I also could do something like append new, and what it will do is it'll create a new key definition saying new keypad space 0. So I can have both in there at the same time, and I can kind of experiment with them and see which one do I want to use. In the case where it's missing one, like here we've got COM1 because I had deleted it, now it just basically says, would you like to append this? So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And now I've got COM1 back in there. And then you just exit. And if we come down here, you can see the COM1 has been brought back in again. So that's the difference between append and selected append. Selected append's really good where, you know, maybe you've got somebody else has done a configuration where they've got a couple of keys in there that you might want to copy and snag because you like their definitions. You could use selected append to look at what they've done and selectively bring in portions of their configuration without necessarily having to drag the whole thing in, you know, or replace stuff that you've already done. Okay, so now that we've got a configuration in here, let's go ahead and try to do some mappings. So what I'm going to do here is see if I can make this a little smaller. See if I can kind of get two things up here at the same time. Okay, so let's say, as an example, I want to start laying out my keypad on my Stream Deck XL. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to start dragging actions over here. Okay, so I'll take this keypad thing and I'll drop it in over here. And you'll notice as soon as I do that, I end up with this property inspector down here where it's asking me the function name. So the function name is basically this over here. So I want this to be keypad 0. So I'm just going to come over here and I'm going to say copy function name. Come over here and highlight it, do a Control V, and hit return. And bang, you'll see that what it's doing is it's showing me that keypad. Now I know I want this to be a little bit bigger, right? So one of the things I can do here is on the text, I can make it a little on the larger side. And we'll bring it up to, let's say, I don't know, 16. I could change the color of that text if I wanted to too. Now, I can come over here and I could drag more and put them over here, but I also know that I probably just want to, since I like this font size, I'm just going to come over here and I'm going to do a copy and then a paste. I'm going to paste a whole bunch of these in here like this. Okay, and I know that because I was consistent in the way I named these, I could come up here, say I want this to be a 1. If that was keypad 0, all I have to do is change that to a 1, right? And I can even come over here and I can ident them, right? Like if I hit ident, actually the ident doesn't show on this piece of software, but it's actually putting a little green check mark on my Stream Deck device, okay? And I could just come on down through here and I'll just, you know, go through these. And I'll just get these all laid out here like this. Okay, this one here, I think we want to be the decimals, so we'll just come over here and copy that function name. And I think I want this one here to be the clear key. That's probably going to be a little different font. I'll do that. And we'll grab the clear key name. That looks like that's pretty good. And then we need the minus, which I think this will work. I'll just copy this, paste it, come over here and grab the function name for the keypad minus. And that's the way that looks. And maybe that could be a little, that's font's pretty good. Okay, so now I have this in here, and if I come over here and I start tapping on my keypad, these should start loading up the number buffer. And if you remember that clear key, the way I've got it defined is it'll show you the values down here. So I put in 121.6. and you can see that it's showing up, in there. And I could hit clear. Right? For like entering radio frequencies. So now I've got this all loaded up. Let's go ahead now and put another key. Let's say, for instance, maybe we want to have the COM1 and COM2 buttons on there. We'll just come over here and we'll drag and put those up here. Go to our definition list. And there we've got the COM1, over there. And I could do the same thing since I know I was consistent in the way I named these, COM1, COM2. I should just be able to come up here and do a copy, paste, change that to COM2. And now we've got COM2 over there, right? And these work similar to the way I did the COM keys on the virtual devices. If I plug in a frequency, right, like I've got here, I'll type in like 125.95. And I should be able to come over here and just touch this COM1 key. And you'll see that what it did is it changed the standby frequency. And the way I have these keys defined is a short press, or basically a long press, is going to swap that back and forth. I probably should put in something other here so you could see this. Let's do 121.6. And you see a short press is flopping that back and forth. I'll do the COM2, a short press on the COM key does a swap back and forth. And a long press, actually, I've got these keys configured so that a long press on the key will actually turn on the audio panel for that radio. So notice I long pressed on the COM2. If I long press again, it toggles that off. Okay, and there's all kinds of other definitions we could put up here. Let's see, what else do we have under our definition list? I don't know. Maybe what we can do is we can put, the transponder code there. So copy that name. And there we've got the transponder code. And same thing, I could put in, like, say I want to squawk VFR. I just type in 1200, on the keypad. And then a long press on the transponder key will do an ident. And I can see I've got this one programmed to flash back and forth. And we're going to actually look at how to do some of this stuff. So that concept there is how you go about effectively configuring and doing a configuration on the X-plane side and then mapping it over on your devices. And I can actually have multiple pages here, right? So example, let's say, for instance, I really wanted this key over on page 2. All I have to do is come up and copy it, go to page 2. Maybe I want it over here on page 2. And then I can come over here and I could delete it. So now I have that on page 2, but not on page 1. And I'm not going to get into how all these layouts work. When the Stream Deck's offered, there's a lot of capability in there. There's pages and there's folders and there's navigation buttons that you can put on here, like this one here will switch you. Okay, if I press it on the Stream Deck device, it switches you back and forth between page 1 and page 2. And you've got similar things to do where you can drag navigation actions over onto the thing here to basically change folders and things like that. And that you'll just have to play with your Stream Deck software and learn how to do it. It's really very powerful. Okay, so why don't we take a look at how to actually do a brand new definition. And I'm just going to move this over here for now and bring this back up to full size. And let's go through and let's redefine the taxi light key. So I've actually got the taxi lights here. I'm going to clear this key out and we'll start new with it, okay? And we're going to make a new taxi light key. So the easiest way to do this is you got to find an empty slot. And you either could do that by coming over to the key definitions and doing the drop down and coming down until you find where it says like key 47. You know that that's a default name. Another way to do it is come over to the definition list and turn on the undefined keys. And here you can find one where there's an empty slot. And then just say go to. First thing we're going to want to do is give this a name. Taxi lights. And again, this is the function name. It's got to be unique, and it is the thing that's going to go over and get mapped on a key that we put over on our Stream Deck device. Okay? Now that we've done that, let's come in and simply say what commands we want to operate with that. So we're going to come over here to commands. We'll do additional commands. And now what we're going to want to do is we have to find the command we want. Well, usually the easiest way to do that is to come over here and look for keywords like taxi. And here's the taxi light toggle. And we should be able to come on down here and go to, let's see, we'll go to the lights. Let me move this out of the way and just try it. Taxi lights toggle. Yep, there it is. So we're going to copy that command. We're going to add a command, and we're going to paste it in here. Okay? Now we've got the command in here. And just to prove that this is going to work, I'm going to bring this back over here again, and I'm going to put this over here, and I'm going to call it taxi lights. And if it's got a definition, you'll notice that it immediately changes to its default representation, which is basically just a black screen with no text. Okay? But to prove to you this works is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to press this key on my Stream Deck XL, and if it's working, see, notice that the taxi light's going on and off. Now that's all well and good, but that doesn't look that great, right? I mean, I'm pressing it, but the key representation is not indicating whether the taxi light's on or not on. So let's go ahead and add that. And let's do something simple. Let's come over here and let's add some lines. Okay? Now, I can do a very simple key label, which the condition is always true, meaning I'm not even going to look at what condition the taxi light's in. I'm just going to put a very simple thing on here that says taxi lights. Okay? And if I come over here and look at it, I've got this label on here. It just says taxi lights. And as I click it, the taxi lights do go on and off. But you'll notice it's not changing anything here. And that's because we don't have anything driving a condition here. It's simply a static, always true taxi lights. So what we want to do is we want to drive this off of some piece of data. And just like we did in the virtual devices or the X-Touch Mini with the little LEDs under their keys on the X-Touch Mini, we're going to want to find a logic data ref and put in a condition that can change this label. So the first thing we want to do is come over here and try to find the data ref that represents that. And the easiest way is to come in and just do like a search. So here's a cockpit electrical taxi lights on and off. Let me press that key. And sure enough, you'll notice that as I toggle that, this data ref is going from a 0 to a 1. 1 meaning the taxi lights are on, 0 means the taxi lights are off. So let's copy this, and let's use that as a logic data ref. Okay? Now we can come back over here to the lines, and we can change the labels here a little bit. We've got one label here. We're going to say when it is equal to 1, we're going to change this label to say taxi on. And we're going to add another label here. When it equals 0, taxi off. And if I did that right, as I push the button, it's going to go back and forth between taxi on and taxi off. Okay? Maybe I don't like that background color being black. Same thing. I could come over here to my background image. I can add a background image. And let's say as an example, maybe I want it always to be one particular color. So I can leave this to be always true. I can come down here and pick a single image. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change it to blue. And if this is working right, sure enough, you'll notice that it's got a blue background. Maybe I'd like it to be that when it is off, it's a black background, but when it's on, it's a red background. So same concept here. We come in here and we add another background image. Let's say that when it is equal to 1, indicating the taxi lights are on, let's say we want this to be a bright red. So we just click that. And when the taxi lights are off, maybe I want it to be black. Let's see how that works. I'll toggle it. Sure enough, when it's on, it's now red, and it's got a label that says on. And when I shut it off, it goes to that. Maybe I'd actually like this to be a really nice looking image underneath the covers there, okay? Now, I don't know if I've got any nice images here, but I'm gonna put some on. Let me show you how to do that. I happen to have a nice package here from, I think it's called FX Show, that you can purchase. They've got some nice Microsoft Flight Simulator images that you can buy as a pack. Yep, here it is here. I'm just going to come over here and I'm going to copy this. I'm going to come back over here to my X-KeyPad folder. And under images, I'm simply going to paste this in here. And then back over here, I do actually have to ask this to reload the image folder. And this takes a minute or so, a few seconds to do. And now I've got all of those really nice images are over here. And I think I can actually filter them if I look for taxi. See, I've got some nice taxi lights on, taxi lights off. They've got like a little glowing LED underneath them. So let's say I want to use those. Well, in this case, I actually have the text is embedded in the image, so I no longer need the lines. So I'm just going to go over here to the lines and I'm going to delete them. Come back over here to the background image and I'm going to pick a different background. So when it is on, I want, let's say, that guy. And when it's off, I want that guy. And if this is all working properly, if I bring it over here, look at it, taxi on, taxi off. So that gives you an idea of how you can create, new keys. It's fairly straightforward. And again, there's a lot more functionality in here, like long presses that you can do, things like that. All you have to do is go back and take a look at some of the other key definitions. Like if we come over here to the definition list, come back over here to the defined ones, you could go look at something like more sophisticated, like the COM1 key, and see how it's working. Like, what logic data ref is it using? What commands is it using? What numeric data refs is it using? And the concepts here of like how you do this, it's very similar to what you do with the X-KeyPad virtual device configurations and the X-Touch Mini. Very similar. Not a whole lot of differences other than the fact that, you don't have quite the same control over the key layouts with the Stream Deck that you do on a virtual device, but it's the same concepts. Okay, so we walked through how to do the Stream Deck key mapping. We looked at how to define a brand new key. Let's take a look at encoders. And let's see, what would be a good encoder to take a look at? Let's come on over here. We'll go to the Stream Deck Plus. And what I'm going to do is we're going to load up a couple of encoders. So I'm just going to drag some actions over here. And let's see, what do we have for a definition list? Go to encoders. Well, we've got the radios. That's a good one to get. So let's come over here and grab that. And on this guy, let's just paste that in here. Same concept, right? I've got a, oh, I want that to be COM1, I think. Right? So there's an encoder definition. And let's see, what's another good one we're going to want to take a look at? Maybe something like the audio volume. That's an interesting one to take a look at. Control V and return. And there we've got the audio volume. Okay? Now, let's take a look at the comm radios just as an example of what you can do with, with encoders. All right, so like you can do on the X-Touch Mini, a single encoder can actually have multiple definitions behind it. The common use for this is using two encoder definitions on one encoder to effectively represent a dual concentric rotary encoder. This is where, like on a radio, typically in an aircraft, you have an outer and an inner knob. You find the same thing on the Garmin 530 page and chapter, knobs, where there's an outer one that you turn and an inner one that you turn. On the Stream Deck Plus, these encoders physically are not dual concentric encoders. They're just a single encoder with a center press push button when you push on the dial. But we can mimic that or emulate that by doing a little bit of trickery here using a multi-encoder. And the way a multi-encoder works with an X-KeyPad is you could define a number of different encoders here. And the way you switch between them is a short press, on the encoder will switch between the primary definition and the secondary definition. The most common use for this is a dual concentric, and you would use two encoders to basically mimic a dual concentric encoder like we have with a radio. You can actually, put 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, a dozen definitions on one encoder, and each short press on that dial is going to increment it around between those different encoders. There is a concept up here of a reset time. If I do indeed have this so that as I press each short press, it switches between the primary encoder to the secondary encoder to the third encoder, etc. If I don't do anything on that encoder for 5 seconds, it'll flip back to being the primary encoder definition again. And if I set this to a 0, then it won't ever go back. It'll stay at wherever I left it at, okay? So in my case here on COM1, I have the primary encoder set up to do the standby coarse frequency, and I have the secondary encoder set up to do the standby fine frequency. The short press on the dial is going to flip back and forth between the primary encoder definition and the secondary encoder definition, okay? I also have the ability that on the primary encoder, we can actually do things like have dial press commands, like when I do a long press on that, what do I want it to do? And on my long press, I've actually got a command set up that what it's going to do is a COM1 standby flip-flop. So the way this encoder is set up, short presses, flips me back and forth between the fine and the coarse standby frequency select, and a long press is going to basically do a flip-flop. And let's actually see if that works, okay? So I'm now turning the dial. You notice that it's changing the coarse frequency. I'm going to do a quick short press. Now it's changing the fine frequency. And I'm going to do a long press. And you'll notice that what it did a flip-flop, right? So a really nice way to define an encoder, to do those two things. One encoder is actually able to represent a dual concentric encoder with short presses flipping me back and forth between the fine, and the coarse, and the long press basically doing that, the flip-flop. And you can define that all on here. Now, a couple of other things. There's a little checkbox here called Use Primary Encoder Logic. What you're going to find with these encoders is they do have the ability to define what's going to happen, okay, when you, when you do a dial press command. So you'll notice here, if I have this set, when I go to the secondary encoder, I have no ability to define what's going to happen with the dial press, because I'm basically saying, regardless of whether I got the primary encoder selected or the secondary encoder selected, a long press on that dial, it's going to do the same thing. It's always going to do a flip-flop. If I uncheck this, I can define what I want that long press to be on each and every encoder that I define. The other thing that you've got control over is the touch tap, okay? And the touch tap is that little LCD panel. In the touch tap, you can define, what do you want it to look like. It's got lines that you could define. It's got a background image you can put on it, right? And you can even have layouts which are going to even have more control over it. And you've got commands associated with what you're going to do if I touch that LCD panel. And I actually have mine set up that if I touch the panel, it's actually going to select which radio is the transmitter. So let's come over here, and we're actually going to want to put that over here. Let's drag and drop this guy over here. And let's change this one to COM2. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to touch the LCD panel on COM2. And what it does is it makes COM2 become, I'm sorry, actually the way it is it is a short press on the touch, on the tap touch. What it does is it turns on the audio monitoring, okay? A long press is actually going to set up COM2 as the transmitting radio.
COM2 set to transmit.
Right? If I come over here and I press COM1 for a long press.
COM1 set to transmit.
And again, a short press is going to determine whether or not the audio panel monitor is on or not. So there's a lot you can add on this encoder definition. With being able to, do things like on the tap touch, what do you want the short press to be? What do you want the long press to be? Or the long tap or the short tap, on the, on the tap touch encoder up there. Now, as I said, we can also do line layouts, and here I've actually got it where I'm showing you the actual frequency for COM1 and COM2, and this is very similar to what you do on a virtual device. Here we've got the the data ref we want to look at, okay, for the COM2 frequency, for the main frequency, and here it is for the standby frequency. And we can actually define what's going to get laid out on that tap touch panel. And you can fit on the tap touch, you can fit by default, you can fit 4 lines on there, and that's exactly what we've got in our example. We've got the static label here, COM1. We've got the current selected active frequency. We've got these sort of just statically dashed line to separate them. And then here we've got the standby frequency. And by default, you can fit up to 4, on there with that particular font size that you've got by default. We can also control the background image. And here we've got 2 different background images that are driven off the logic data ref, which just happens to be whether the audio panel monitor is selecting and basically monitoring that audio or not. And then with that, you can get either, if it equals 0, you're going to end up with a blue background, and if it's equal to 1, you're going to end up with a red background with the lines, being on there. This is all exactly the same as what you could do on a on a key label. It's just that what it's going to do is it's going to show up on that little LCD panel up there. Okay. So I think that gives you an idea of what you can do. Now, let's take a look at this volume control over here, because this is an interesting one. You'll notice as I turn this up and down, it's affecting the volume on the panel. I've got another interesting thing here. This has got a little bar graph on here. It's also got a little slightly different image, on it, and you'll notice that the font colors are different. You can actually have more control over what's being displayed in this panel using this concept of Stream Deck layouts. And I actually want to walk through and show you what a layout looks like. Now, this is kind of an advanced topic. You actually have to look at the manual, and you actually have to go to the Stream Deck SDK documentation to see how these layouts are programmed. But I'm going to quickly come over here, and we're going to look at this audio volume, and we're going to come over here to this layouts tab. Now, by default, you're going to be able to display 4 lines on there, and the lines are going to happen to match up exactly with the lines that you would define over here on the lines tab. But in my case, I want to override this. Okay, I want to be able to control what the font size is. I want to control the color, and I even want to do things like being able to have things like a bar graph on there and where the image is going to go. And you could do that with these layouts. And it is a JSON format, that you show here for being able to do that. And what I'm going to do is put this in a little bit better editor so we can actually see it better. You can see it here, but it's a little hard to read. I'm just going to copy that to the clipboard. And then I'm going to bring up, I happen to use Visual Studio, which lets me look at JSON files, but there's a number of free JSON editors out there that you can use that you might want to take a look at. So we're going to just quickly come up here and do a new file. JSON file. I'm going to paste it in here. And the only reason I want to use this is that it formats it a little bit easier. It's a little color codes a little bit easier to see. Now, what are the types of things that you can put in a layout? Well, there's basically 3 things that you can display. You can display text, you could display an image, and you could display basically a bar graph. And there's a couple of different flavors of bar graphs that you could display. Now, the way we map the data that's coming out of the X-KeyPad configuration to this is we do it entirely off of the name of the key for the particular type of item. So in our case is a element type of text has a rectangle, it's got a font size and a font weight. And you could also specify the color of the font and the alignment, whether it's left, center, or right. But the actual data that goes in there has to come from the X-KeyPad configuration. And we basically do that by making sure that the key here lines up with either line 0, line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4, line 5, line 6, which happens to be exactly what you would find. I'm just going to come over here and quickly change to the definition of the COM radio so you can see this. See? Line 0, line 1, line 2, line 3. So whatever text we generate over here, in that configuration or in that layout, that's how it's going to know what to set in here. But the rest of it we have control over, right? Like, what do we want that font to be, the size, the weight, and the color, and that type of thing. Now, a couple of things here. This little LCD panel is only 100 high by 200 pixels wide. So whatever rectangles you fit in there have got to be able to fit in that particular position. And what you're going to determine is what is its offset from the left, what is its offset from the top, how wide is it going to be, which is the 100 here, and how high is it going to be. So the text that you put's got to fit within this rectangle. So you notice here that the size is 25 points. It's a 25-point font. This 25 height here has got to be 25 or bigger. typically you make them the same, all right? If you make this too small, then that font size is not going to fit within that rectangle. And frankly, what you're going to find is with the Stream Deck software, the layout compiler in it is really sensitive. If you make it not fit, it actually chokes on it. It may actually give you an error somewhere down in the bowels of the Stream Deck logs, and then it just won't work properly. So unfortunately with these layouts, they're very sensitive. You've got to do them exactly the way it expects it to be, or it's not going to work, okay? So looking at text, there is a rectangle here which is determining its offset from the left, 80 pixels in from the left-hand side of the 100 by 200 image. It's down 5 pixels from the top. It's going to be 100 pixels wide, which is the full, which is sort of like the half width or the, you know, that, and it's going to be 25 pixels high. The weight here is kind of arbitrary. It's basically how fat that's going to look. And then there's the color. And these colors here are your typical hexadecimal colors. FFFF is pure white. Okay? And then the alignment. And let's quickly come over here and take a look at what that looks. You know, here we've got the volume and its alignment is center. And you can see that it's offset a little bit. It's not actually perfectly within the center because we have this thing offset 80 pixels over from the left-hand side. Okay? The next thing is we've got line 2, which is some other text here. And I think this is going to be this % down here. If we actually look at the definition of that key, we've got to come to the definition for the volume, audio volume. Go to the lines, and you could see that line 2 is the %. So here's line 2. It's the %. We have it offset in from 80, but you'll notice that this time it's down 73 pixels from the top. And that's because we want it to be drawn down here. And, you know, that's how we get it to sort of the bottom of the screen. It's centered, and it's got a different color. It's 00FF00, and since this is hexadecimal for red, green, blue, basically it has no red component. It's got a full-on green component and no blue component. That's what makes it a green, you know, text color. The other thing we have here is this image. Probably a little hard to see here, but it's a little bit of an icon of a speaker. And I actually have that where it's a full-blown, if we take a look at it in the definition, you can see it's actually a 100 by 200 image with a little icon sitting over here. So we just need to have this image fill up the whole part of that 100 by 200 pixel display. Right, like that. So let's come over here and take a look at the definition. So the image, we notice it's got 0 for a left offset, 0 for a Y offset. So the part of this image, it starts in the upper left-hand corner of that 100 by 200 LCD panel. It's going to be 200 wide, and it's going to be 100 high. Okay? That's how that fits within there. The last element we've got is the bar graph. And the way the bars graphs works is the values are going to be associated with effectively a line. I know that's a little hard concept to understand, but if we come back over here and we look at the lines, you'll see that line 1, all I've got here is it's simply a pure numeric value, and it's a representation of the master volume ratio, which is a data rep that goes between 0 to 1.0. I have a float scale factor of 100 on here so that as I turn the volume up, it's always going to be represented as a number between 0 to 100. That's what these bar graphs with the layouts want. They want a pure number, 0 to 100, which represents how much of the bar graph should be filled in. And the way we have to line it up is that the val 1 is going to be associated with line 1, and this line has to be just a pure number. You notice I don't have any other text in there like percents or volumes or anything like that. Just a plain number. And the way it does this mapping within the layout is val 1 is going to be the numeric text that came out of line 1 in the configuration. The subtype is going to determine the type of a bar it is, and the Stream Deck SDK will show you what the different bar graphs are, how they're represented. The rectangle, it's got a horizontal offset of 80 in from the left, and a vertical offset of 50. So you'll notice that it comes in a little bit from the left so that it doesn't overlap the little speaker image here. And it's down 50 pixels from the top. It's going to be 110 pixels wide and 20 pixels high to fit in there. And this value here, you can set it to whatever you want, but this value is going to get overwritten by whatever we get coming out of that line 1 pure number text. The last thing is the Z order. If none of these rectangles overlap, you could actually make the Z order all be the same. But the Z order, in effect, is what order are they going to get drawn? So in our case, we want the icon to get drawn first because it's the lowest thing. And then on top of that, we're then going to draw the bar graph. Then we're going to draw the two texts. And I noticed that I made the Z order on the text the same. That's because these rectangles don't overlap each other, so it doesn't matter. If they overlapped each other, you want to determine which one do you want drawn first. And in most cases with text, you don't want them to overlap each other. But the images definitely could be draw the image first, then the other things on top of it. So I know that's a very quick description of these layouts. The best thing to do is look at the samples where we've done more of them. As an example here, I have another encoder we can put on here. And I think it's the transponder. Let's take a look at the definition list. Yeah, the transponder. Let's take a look at that. Put in transponder. You'll notice what this one is I've got it where the text is small up here, but then it's got a big line. The third line is actually a much bigger text size. And if we come over and look at that definition for the transponder, let's do a go to. We look at the layout. You'll notice that we've got line 0 and line 1 are both at a 25 point height, but line 2, it's 50, right? And you'll notice that it's got an offset. Its vertical offset is 50 from the top. So you can see a little bit about how, you could do a similar layout, but just have some of the lines be a bigger size than the other ones. So look at some of the samples that we've given you, and you can get a sense of how these layouts work. And what I would do is I would just copy these layouts and paste them into your own so that you could play with them. And I admit they are a little tricky. You've got to be careful with them because the Stream Deck software is very sensitive to the syntax being correct on them. So it's kind of an advanced topic, but you can get it to do, quite a bit. Okay, let's see. Let's talk a little bit about expressive commands and see how they might get used. So what's an expressive command? They're very similar to formulas, where with a global formula you can have a set of variables, and the output of the evaluation of that formula and those variables can get written to a data ref. Very useful for doing calculations and setting data refs within the simulator to values. Formulas, however, though, get evaluated on every flight loop. Every time the flight loop runs, that formula gets evaluated, and if necessary, the output data ref will get written to and updated. An expressive command is like a formula, except we only want it to get evaluated when a key is pressed that's associated with that particular data ref. And where these expressive commands come in handy is on occasion you will find aircraft where there is no command behind the function. All it's got is a writable data ref. And you're going to want to either use a logic data ref that can increment up and down to manipulate it, or something like an expressive command where I can control what's going on with that data ref when I press a key. So we're going to use a very simple example. One, we're going to go back to our taxi light, and rather than using commands to operate the taxi light, we're going to actually use an expressive command to do it. So let's come back over to our taxi light definition. Go go to the keys. We'll go to our taxi light. And if you remember correctly, we're operating the taxi lights using this taxi lights toggle on or off. We're going to actually make believe that this command does not exist. And I was working with one user. He actually had an aircraft where there was no ability to toggle the taxi lights with a command. He had no choice but to do it with a data ref. Okay? So we're going to actually come in here and we're going to delete this command and we're going to start all over again. Now I know in the case of this taxi light that I believe this data ref is indeed editable. And let's just confirm that. We're going to bring up the data ref tool. We're going to search for this command, for this data ref. And I want to make sure that if I edit it, it will operate the taxi lights. So I put it to a 1. Yep, the taxi lights go on. If I put it to a 0, the taxi lights go off. Okay? So I know that this data ref I could use as part of my expressive command. So I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to highlight that and do a Control-C to copy it. Now I'm going to go to my expressive commands. And I actually got one in here, but what I'm going to do is delete it so I can start all over again, for you. We're going to add an expressive command. I'm going to call this taxi light toggle, because you have to give it a name. First thing we have to do is define a result data ref, which is going to basically be this taxi light data ref here, which means that whatever the evaluation comes out to, when it gets done being evaluated, the result is going to get stored, over there. Now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add a variable. And the variable I need to add is going to be the current state of the taxi lights. So we'll just call this taxi light. And it's going to be exactly the same data ref. Okay? So this variable, I'm going to look at it and I'm going to go, if it's a 0, then I want you to return a 1. If it's a 1, I want you to return a 0. All it's going to do is toggle it back and forth. If it's off, turn it on. If it's on, turn it off. Now we simply need to come over here and create an expression for that. So I say if I can remember my syntax here. Okay, so it's as simple as this. If the taxi light equals 0, then return a 1, else return a 0. And all we can do is just test it here to make sure that it's working. Oops, I got it wrong. It's fussy. It wanted that on the same line. Right? So as I test this, which is going to basically be the representation of me flipping this thing back and forth. When I hit the key, it's doing what I want it to do, right? So go back to review it again. If the taxi light variable equals 0, meaning the taxi lights are off, then return a 1, else return a 0, okay? So we're just going to save that. And then we're going to come back over here to our taxi lights. Definition list. And now in the commands, I'm going to add a command. But this time over here under commands, I'm going to look over under expressive commands, and there's my taxi lights. And I could try it real quick here, right? I can make sure that it works. Sure enough, see, it's flipping it back and forth. I'm just going to copy it, add a command. paste it in. And then as I press I have to tell it here that it's an expressive command. And if all's working right, as I press the button on the Stream Deck, sure enough, it's toggling it. Now, clearly you wouldn't use an expressive command in a situation like on a taxi light where you already have a built-in command, whether the aircraft provides it or X-Plane's providing it directly. But, like I said, this one user, he had an aircraft where there was no command to toggle the taxi lights. You could turn the taxi lights on and off in the 3D cockpit using the mouse, but the aircraft designer never bothered, to create a command for it. So he was able to use an expressive command to be able to operate that particular key. You could also, by the way, use logic or numeric data refs to do this too. It's just that what's nice about expressive commands is you could use them in long press and short press modes that you can't do that with a numeric data ref. So they got a little bit more capability to them, and given that you've got a formula or an expression behind it, you could do a lot more complex, logic if you wanted to. So I think that gives you a pretty quick overview of the Stream Deck devices, how they can work. And again, this is just sort of a sample. I recommend you look at some of the other key definitions to get a feeling for how they all work. And again, as I pointed out, review the earlier tutorials on the virtual devices and the X-Touch Minis, because a lot of what you learn in there and how to operate encoders and how to do key layouts, it all works okay for the Stream Deck too, just with the caveats that there are slight differences between the different parts of the hardware. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you enjoy using X-KeyPad to program your Stream Deck devices.